Stanley Parable. Such a simple and extremely short game, yet replayable so many times, even though what you are pretty much doing is this.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
The gameplay itself was so riveting that they decided to make the game not once, not twice, but thrice. So let's start from the very beginning. Stanley Parable is a Half-Life 2 mod created by David Braden and it was released in July 31, 2011. This was David's first and last mod. He mainly made the mod out of career ambition, and he wanted to answer a very simple question with the project, which is what would happen if you could display the narrator. Did he succeed with this? Let's find out. But first, the premise. You are an office worker named Stanley. Stanley's job at the company was simple. He needed to push buttons on a keyboard according to the blue screen of death. This was Stanley's job at the company for every day and every month of every year. And Stanley was both satisfied and smiling. Until one day, everyone at the company disappeared. It's up to you to find out what happened. Nothing more, nothing less. Let's talk visuals. It's very simplistic for its time, because of the reused Half-Life 2 assets. For starters, Stanley is played by the famous Halo 7 NPC rather than a custom-made one. I highly recommend Richter Overtime's video on why this NPC is so famous inside the Valve community. These elements highlight the short development time the mod has. For reference, No More Room in Hell came out the same year and had a lot more original assets to it and looks better because of it. Or Minerva, which came out in 2007, had a better use of the existing assets and it was also made by one person. But on the other hand, the level design is really good. The tight hallways and large rooms really gives you this uneasy feeling the first time you play, kinda like being in an ant colony. It's easy to imagine people being in these rooms and doing normal stuff, making rooms more lively, but without anyone around, the rooms seem abandoned and cold. Unlike the future games, the mod soundtrack is composed of existing soundtracks, mainly from the movie American Beauty. Aside the fact that this is Kevin Spacey's most poorly aged role, Thomas Newman's soundtrack is really good, even on its own, and it fits this mod surprisingly well. Probably because Dead already does a great job songifying the mundanes of everyday life. Too bad I can't play it because the video gets claimed, but what can you do? What the intro also showed us is that we have a narrator voiced by Kevin Briding. It really makes this mod extremely memorable.
Entering his manager's office, Stanley was once again stunned to discover not an indication of any human life. It was at this point that he began to feel dizzy and a little sick, and even thought he might pass out when suddenly he noticed a keypad next to the filing cabinet in the corner of his boss's office. Stanley had never seen this panel before and had no idea what combination of numbers would produce any result. In fact, only Stanley's boss knew this, since the panel withheld access to the boss's greatest, darkest secret.
And with that, what remains is the story, the endings, and the narrator to discuss. If you don't want any spoilers, go to here. It's really ironic how the basic story that the narrator came up with, the foundation of the other endings, pretty much is just a major contrast of what he does to Stanley. This is the path that never changed in any of the games. It always was the most basic story of having your free will, to a point that the plot holes are not plot holes, they are plot gaps. Like, where did people actually go? Is there a point disabling the generator if no one is giving commands? None of this is answered. It's also interesting how versatile of a character the narrator is. He can be our main antagonist, ally, or sidekick depending on which ending you are trying to get. But true, in the mod, him being your ally is not explored completely. You hear him unintentionally tell you the office password, or when he follows you in the game ending. The endings follow the general pattern of if you defy him from the start but you decide last minute to follow him, he will punish you. But if you decide to follow him but defy him at the last moment, he will punish you as well. Basically, the good endings rely on either the illusion of choice or the complete freedom of choice. Stanley always ends up dead or insane, because he either tries to break away from the illusion of choice at the last second, or the opposite happens. He decides he rejects by giving the narrator a chance. Overall, this is what boils down to Stanley Parable. Choice. Do you want someone else tell you what to do and always think that's what you wanted? Or you wanted the freedom to choose despite the fear of the unknown? Overall, a pretty solid mod, but it's still more of a proof of concept instead of a fully fledged game. It's still worth checking out. You just need to download the Source SDK from 2007 and getting the mod from ModDB. The mod was a major success, and David couldn't handle it at first, but a few months later he more or less accepted it. He got a lot of offers from different companies, but he decided he's making his own studio instead. During all this, he met a fellow modder named William Hook. William made many mods for many Source games and won a Sexy Award in 2011 for Best Set Design for the video What is Beauty? For those who don't know what the Sexies are, it's an award show that rewards people that make animated chores with a program named Source Filmmaker. But during its first year of Sexies, you get a Sexy based off your gameplay as well if you use TF2's then new Rewind feature. Beyond this, some of William's other maps have been lost to time, but there are still some things left. The TF2 achievement map in Game Banana, some Portal 2 maps in the Steam Workshop, and William's YouTube channel showing off some created maps, including the sexy winner What is Beauty. Based off the YouTube videos, the maps he made seem pretty intricate and creative, no doubt very talented. The two formed a company named Galactic Cafe and they started development on a Stanley Parable remake. But a week before the release of said remake, they released an appetizer that many people overlooked over time, but I think it deserves a little bit of taste. The Stanley Parable demonstration is not just a demo that shows off the story with a handful of endings, but more like a separate game that teases us with things to come. There are even personalized versions made for YouTubers like the Game Grumps.
This is trippy. Wow, this must be like a collection of,
Hello. Welcome to this Steam Train live demonstration of the Stanley Parable.
Oh shit, that's
Today,
us!
it will be my pleasure to guide Ross and Danny through this sneak peek
Oh,
at what to
damn!
expect in the Stanley Parable.
What?
A tease, just enough to leave you hungry for more. How exciting.
Galactic Cafe, you're awesome.
Feel like
But beyond the fact that the narrator addresses them personally, nothing is different. You are the player who is here to check out the demonstration. Everything is still on the Source engine, but assets are completely or at least mostly unique for now. There are even assets that only appear in the demo, like the wall canter for instance. And also, you get a new taste of the new and original soundtrack.
Here we go, the Stanley Parable demo take 2. Finding the demo, learning exactly what the Stanley Parable is. Here it comes. Oh wait, what's this?
8.
Wait.
Eight.
This is all wrong. This isn't the
8.
Stanley Parable. This is a
8.
game where you press a button and it says 8. Not only
8.
is the Stanley Parable not a
8.
game about continuously
8.
pressing the number 8,
8.
I can guarantee
8.
that this button does not
8.
appear anywhere in the main
8.
game.
The demo, while it only has one ending, it still has half the length of the OG mod. I think it's worth at least one playthrough, just because of the different jokes and different dialogue the narrative says compared to the base game. Speaking of which, the Stanley Parable, or the Stanley Parable Hl2 remix, it's not a title David Written will tell you, released in October 17, 2013, It originally started as a 1-to-1 remake, but eventually they decided to make their scope much bigger. For starters, we have a more polished intro now, where Stanley uses his chair instead of just standing in one place. Secondly, Stanley has a new face now, although his face is a lot more generic now, which I guess is the point, considering he is a random office worker, not an action hero. The art style changed significantly. Almost all the rooms have a distinctive color to them, making the rooms a lot more different from one another. There are additional rooms now, like the broom closet and the bathroom. The kitchen is replaced with a meeting room. There is a waiting room towards the elevator, and the normal elevator is replaced with a warehouse elevator. There are more changes to the levels, but these are the most significant ones. What also changed a major way is the level design, and with that, the tone. Here is the walk from your office to the set of 2 doors in the mod.
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left.
And here is that same walk in HD Remix.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
They pretty much removed the tight hallways of the original and added in more wider rooms. The mod only had private offices. The HD remix has both private offices and cubicles. Because of this, the tone shifts from suspenseful thriller to whimsical mystery. What also highlights this change is the original soundtrack, which was teased in the demo. It serves the mystery of the original song pretty well, but doesn't try to replicate the atmosphere. Which I'm not saying it's a bad choice, but it sort of teases you that this one is going to be more light-hearted than the original. But regardless, this is still a great soundtrack and gives the game its own voice. Although the tonal change is more and more apparent, which I think it's why the game is a remix rather than a remake. The OG mod had a much bleaker and cynical tone to it, while here everything is brighter and somber now. Even the narrator is less rude than the original.
Stanley was so bad at following directions, it's incredible he wasn't fired years ago. Maybe this is why everyone had left. No one wanted to be around someone as bad at listening as him. And since he was walking into the middle of nowhere and thus ruining the entire story, Stanley decided that he would punish himself. So when he came to the elevator and the doors opened, he stepped inside and pushed the button to go up. Stanley was so bad at following directions, it's incredible he wasn't fired years ago. Look, Stanley, I think perhaps we've gotten off on the wrong foot here. I'm not your enemy, really, I'm not. I realize that investing your trust in someone else can be difficult, but the fact is that the story has been about nothing but you all this time. There's someone you've been neglecting, Stanley. Someone you've forgotten about. Please, stop trying to make every decision by yourself. Now, I'm not asking for me, I'm asking for her.
It's kinda like comparing a UK show to a US remake, which is funny because David Whedon is from the US and William Poole is from the UK. So it took a UK person to make a US remake more lighthearted, not the other way around. And with that, we come to the story section once again. If you don't want to get spoiled, go to here. Another reason why this is a remix is that a lot of the endings have been modified and we also have much more endings. The Freedom, Mariella and the Explosion endings are the same, the apartment ending is pretty much the same.
We're gonna need a shit of chow mein.
Only the path is different. What completely changed is the escape/museum ending and the game's ending, but those are going to be longer rants for now. Let's talk about the newer ones. The reluctant and that endings are funny additions, short but sweet. The escape pod ending feels so unsatisfying to a point that someone made a mod for it. It's just a lot of walking and then a black screen. Not much else to it. If I could fix it, I would have made Stanley just walk up to the pod, launch it, and make the pod do alarm sound, and then do a black screen. This ending is interesting because this is an ending where Stanley torments the narrator, which is interesting in a conceptual sense, but this ending also further differentiates the game from the mod, considering the setup is the same, like half the mod endings. Stanley gives the narrator one chance for control, and in this scenario, he doesn't punish him. Instead, he wants peace. If this ending was the result of a random detour, I would have liked it more, but because how it's placed, I'm kinda mixed. The confusion ending is interesting, because this is the ending where the narrator and Stanley team up because neither knows the outcome. This is definitely the most chaotic ending of them all, for sure. The player ending feels like a more extreme version of the game's ending, where they replace subtlety with over-the-top comedy. The narrator shows a short film about choice, the lift has rails, the lower stairs are gone. Don't get me wrong, this ending is funny, but kinda lost the deepness of the original game's ending. Speaking of which, let's talk about the escape/museum ending and the game's ending, because they are so different from the original endings. The lead up of the escape ending is different. Instead of Stanley giving the narrator a chance and the narrator decides to kill him, they alter so that you have to actively go from the beaten path, while the narrator has to force his hand in order to kill you. The museum is a nice addition. It fits to add it to an ending where another higher force saves Stanley. Also, I know it's a matter of preference, but I prefer the OG female narrator rather than the HD remakes one. She has a more urgent and agitated voice when you get close to the presser.
You'll be walking someone else's path. Stop now and it'll be your only true choice. Whatever you do, choose it. Don't let time choose for you. Don't let time.
As long as you move forward, you'll be walking someone else's path. Stop now, and it'll be your only true choice. Whatever you do, choose it. Don't let time choose for you. Don't let time...
And finally, the ending that I have the most to pick on, the game's ending. It's way too different from the original for starters. The narrator doesn't seem that mad in the game's ending. He generally enjoys the games rather than be angry about the fact that it's not his game anymore.
Yes, it's complete. I made this, Stanley. Look at it. Gaze upon my work of art and feel ashamed at your own inadequacy. Yes, I don't even know what this game is, but I love it. You, trapped in a glass box with no way out, listening to me talk. Oh, it's inspired. I couldn't have done it any better myself. What is this game even?
Negating the true freedom of the original ending. Also, it has way too much fluff now. You could have made the feedback segment and the baby game a completely different ending, but no, we need more fluff for some reason. Although it was a nice touch seeing the old office again, but in darkness, further reminding you the thrilling atmosphere of the original. But then you get to your old office and hear the narrator's monologue. It's not good if you ask me.
I wonder what he found. If what he wanted was to be the leading man in his own story, well, perhaps he's gotten it, down in wherever he is right now. I wonder if he's happy with his choice, and if he's learned the heavy cost that comes with it. He'll understand soon what I was trying to tell him. He needs me. Someone who will wrap everything up at the end, to make sense out of the chaos and the fear and the confusion. That's who I am. That is what I mean to this world. Oh, yes. Yes, I'll be back. There's no other way. Once this ends, after it all comes to a close, then I'll be back. The end will be here soon. Very soon. I can wait.
To retcons one of the endings that feel like one of the definitive endings of the game into being just an ending. The other definitive ending is the freedom ending. They sacrificed a good theme or message for more gameplay, which I think is sad. These two endings kinda served as pillars to the game, but now that one pillar is destroyed, the game is much more different for it, considering that we don't have an ending where Stanley is definitely free, where the narrator is forced to beat the destination rather than be the usual guide.
It's sad, I know, but all stories must come to an end. Of course, they say it's the journey that truly matters and not the destination, and I like that idea. To think we might value the paths we walk as much as the places they lead us. Now, I don't know what sort of story you've ciphered out of that world you've made for yourself, but I hope that being the leading man was everything it's cracked up to be. I know it can be a little hard getting around without someone looking over your shoulder, but this is simply the nature of freedom. Besides, I haven't really gone anywhere. Maybe you don't want a guide, but I think I'll always have a place here at the end of every story. I'll step in and wrap things up with a nice piece of dialogue and a reflection on life that makes sense of whatever path you've chosen to walk. And for now, I'm happy to be the destination instead of the journey. But only for now.
HD Remix is a completely different beast from the OG mod, but I still recommend it. This is a game that's guaranteed that you are going to laugh. Expect this game to be the US office equivalent to the UK office, where the setup is the same, but the tone, the humor, the storytelling is just completely different. Well then, the game was a critical and commercial success, but the development of the game was so stressful that two went on their separate ways. Davey made The Beginner's Guide, a story from another time, and William quit Galactic Cafe and made his own studio, Crows. They still remained friends thankfully, but both felt they needed some time alone. But a good duo shouldn't be separate for too long. So in the 2018 Game Awards, they announced a new version of their baby. I think going in, a lot of people, myself included, thought this game would be an upgraded HD remix, with a lot more endings added in, but the final result is more complicated than that. Way more complicated than that. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's talk graphics. It's a really good one-to-one recreation of the HD remix office. Even though this time around the game runs in Unity, everything looks how you remember the game used to look, but in actuality this game has sharper textures and more dynamic shadows than the original. The original music remains the same, but we have a much bigger soundtrack now, considering the bigger game we now have. And the new songs still fit into the original game. In terms of controls, we have a new addition to the game, which is auto running, which makes you come in way faster through everything. Yeah, this one's a much harder game to discuss without spoilers. The only thing I can say is that beyond remastering their previous game, adding some new content to it, they really are laser focusing on satire. With that out of the way, let's just jump into it. If you don't want any spoilers, go to here.
Commando.
Right, so I previously compared the previous game and the mod to both versions of The Office, Well then, this game is what would happen if somebody made a 4K re-release of the US office, say there would be bonus behind the scenes content, secretly made a special where the cast in character celebrate the show's anniversary, and then there would be a sequel series where everyone gets back to the office doing their old jobs again, but this time everyone is bisexual in order to create new relationships, and they would actively make fun of the concept of doing a sequel series. Also, the marketing campaign only advertised all this as a 4K re-release of The Office with extra features. That's Ultra Deluxe. It's a remaster with extra content, a celebration of the original game, and a cash grab sequel, all at the same time. We're gonna tackle everything one thing at a time, because this would be very confusing if that didn't happen. We already talked about the remaster aspect of the game, so what's the extra content? Well, the game's ending got another facelift. This time, we got beloved Valve game Firewatch and Rocket League for this ending, but the monologue is still sadly the same in the end.
I wonder what he found. If what he wanted was to be the leading man in his own story, well, perhaps he's gotten it, down in wherever he is right now. I wonder if he's happy with his choice, and if he's learned the heavy cost that comes with it. He'll understand soon what I was trying to tell him. He needs me. Someone who will wrap everything up at the end, to make sense out of the chaos and the fear and the confusion. That's who I am. That is what I mean to this world. Oh, yes, I'll be back. There's no other way. Once this ends, after it all comes to a close, then I'll be back. The end will be here soon. Very soon. I can wait.
We have a tape recorder ending where a popular game theory is dismissed, where the narrator was mostly in Stanley's head.
The office had begun so far off the beaten path that it seemed the office had begun. You didn't think I was actually just a recording, did you? What a silly and trite explanation that would be. All the back and forth between you and me, all the absurd adventures we've been through, and it all turns out I'm just a tape recording? It was all just in Stanley's head. I bet that's the kind of twist you think is revelatory. I bet each and every time you watch a movie where it turns out all to be in the main character's imagination, you must absolutely bolt off the couch in pure shock at the phenomenal and intricate storytelling. It must be so simple to be you. Life being an unending waterfall of surprises and delights. How much more exciting you must find the world than the rest of us do. Now I've become sad. Look what you've done to me. This is all your fault.
There's an ending that turns a bug from HD Remix into an ending.
Aha! You've made it to the bottom of the mind control facility. Welcome! You see, back when the Stanley Parable first launched in 2013, getting to the bottom of the mind control facility was a bug that we simply didn't catch during development. And you all sent us lots of photos of it on Twitter and acted very superior about it. And you're all very, very clever. Good for you. Anyway, when it came time to update the game, we knew that we had to do something about this little goof of ours. So here you go. New content. You can call it the bottom of the mind control room ending, if that enhances your perception of the value of these updates. Isn't that what you crave? New content? Always more content, more content, more. And I'm here to give it to you. I'm here to make it seem like we really covered every nook and cranny of the game with secrets and Easter eggs. How about this? We wrote a new piece of music just for this section. You won't hear it anywhere else in the game. It's a secret that's just for you. That's how special you are. We call this track, Good Job You've Made It to the Bottom of the Mind Control Facility. Well done.
And finally, a conference ending, where Stanley can make a conference about life or something.
And it's really all because of you. You're the one who took this bold step of revisiting the exact same locations over and over. Truly, I mean it. This is unique and different. It's not like anything else out there. You see, I want stories that surprise me, Stanley. I want to have to think. I want to be engaged and not pandered to. We're being fed such unimaginative drivel all the time, and we all know it, which is why we're so starved for content that makes us feel sharp and vital and alive. That's why people like you so much, Stanley, because you're not afraid to spit in the face of tradition. You're a role model, you know? People look up to you. Which is why, oh, I didn't know when to spring this on you, but, well, I've gathered a little press conference for you, so that you can talk about your work and your storytelling and your life. Yes, I know you're not much for the public eye, but I thought it would especially mean a lot to the people who have been following you from the beginning. They really look up to you, Stanley. I don't know if you realize the impact you have on them. This is the kind of gesture that might leave a tremendous impact on them for the better. Oh good, we're here. Okay, the room where we're holding the press conference should be just around the corner here somewhere.
Next up is being the celebration aspect of his game. This game rubs in very hard how successful HD remakes was. Uncle Stan tells you this.
Hello, and thank you for playing the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe. As you may know, the Stanley Parable was a video game released in 2013 on home computers. After receiving critical and commercial success, it was expanded upon in 2022 with the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe, a reimagining of the game for consoles and home computers.
There is a section in the game called the Memory Zone where you can look at the awards won.
Je suis dans la memory zone, c'est sur l'abri des vélos, et je n'attends plus que toi, mon amour. C'est là, dans la memory zone, où je me remémore les
There are gags related to the Stanley Parable YouTube videos.
The clown collecting dust in the hallowed hall of beloved video game
Mais
memories.
ici, c'est aussi où je me souviens.
Nothing. People play games because of what they can do inside them, and your game is very good at letting them know they can't do anything. Other things I didn't like were the amount of narrator dialogue too much, and that Stanley is repeated all the time by the narrator. Overall, your game is on a good path, I think. Good luck with it, and best regards, Raphael.
You know, Raphael, at first your negative response to the game devastated me. After all, I managed to squeeze so many emotions into the first game. How could a logical yet emotional person like yourself have been disappointed? But then I realized that much to the contrary, your emotional standard is simply much higher than a normal human being's. So I've come to think of you as a mentor, an emotional beacon toward which I might sail my wayward narrative ship. That's why I've discarded the Stanley Parable as it previously existed and rebuilt it from the ground up to capture not just many emotions, but all emotions. And I think few would disagree that it's a significant step up. Why don't I take you on a little demo walkthrough? This is the story of a love samurai named Stanley. I intend to offer you a finite number of things to do. The Stanley Parable is breaking ground by allowing the player to do literally anything. Let's look at an example. In this scenario, the player has just infused a bicycle with the soul of his great-great-great-uncle Hermophrides. From this point, he might use Hermophrides' ethereal presence to detect nearby mineral deposits, or perhaps he might train the bicycle in the art of undoing temporal paradoxes. It seems that the player has chosen to use the haunted bicycle to deceive townsfolk as a part of his snake oil salesman ruse. How bold.
Etc. But everything goes wrong when you get to the Steam reviews, or
Pressurized gas.
reviews in the console version. The narrator, of course, only reads the negative ones, shattering his ego in the process.
And unfunny, with his humor and dialogue proving to be more irritating than entertaining. Unfunny! I'm not trying to be funny. I'm trying to make a serious work of art, this one says. While the idea for the game is good, for someone who prefers non-linear games, this preachiness gets annoying fast. Preachy? Stanley? I'm not preachy, am I? I feel like a failure. Like I let these people down. Perhaps the Stanley Parable isn't quite as sterling as I always remembered. You constantly have to stop doing anything so the narrator can catch up with his long-winded explanations of what's happening. I wish there was a skip button.
And when he reads the last review, he implements a skip button. Thanks to the skip button, the narrator dies. We don't know if physically or mentally, but he dies.
But they didn't understand the game was never meant to be funny. It was meant to have a point. It was meant to speak to the human condition. But where are the jokes? Where are the jokes? They bemoaned, they screamed, they gnashed their teeth and said, entertain us. It wasn't enough. They had to leave a pathetic little thumbs-down review and make all of their pitiful demands. But then, he's talking too much, they said. First, he didn't entertain us, now he won't shut up. It's the inconsistency, it's the lack of accountability. It's the unwillingness to examine with an uncompromising heart the words that they are speaking into the world. As though there were no consequences for a lack of cohesion in one's assessment of others. But of course, absolutely anyone can leave a review. So here's what we get. We get these demands that seek everything and are accountable to nothing. We get a world where someone will say, oh, there should be a skip button. You should be able to freeze Stanley in place while the narrator sits there forever and ever. We want all of this in the new Stanley Parable. We demand it. And then, because it was said, because it was spoken, now it simply has to happen. The most immediate desires, every single thing demanded by every person at every moment in time. If someone wants it, then it's a crime not to bring it into being. Have we been given to indulging every fleeting whim for no reason other than to do so? Yes! Yes! It seems that this is now the world we live in. It seems that we are a people living in such bleakness and discomfort with ourselves that our entertainment is now our lives. It has come to represent us. It absolutely must speak to who we are as people, because otherwise, without our entertainment, we have nothing. Without entertainment, we would have to face inward toward the cruel bleakness inside ourselves. We would turn to look at our deeper nature and find a resounding emptiness gazing back with unyielding aggression. And so because of this, we require that our amusements and our playthings and our flights of fancy be so impossibly captivating that they consume all of our attention, turn our heads completely away from the bleakness. In effect, we have demanded that our entertainment be the collapse of ourselves. What a pitiful reflection of humanity these entertainments are. What a shameful mirror to the human spirit they project. I'm not mad. I'm not mad about any of this. I'm at peace with it. I am the calm center of gravity around which these perversions hurl themselves. I am a waypoint for reasonable and collected discourse. They're the ones who are mad. They're the ones who couldn't stand the idea of me using my game to try to say something. Maybe they were just jealous of me. Yes, of course. They've been jealous of me this whole time. They are mired in fear and insecurity and cannot help but attempt to tear me down. What a sad state of affairs. When you read these reviews now, you can see it. You can taste the bitter resentment. And my, how good does it feel now to speak truth to these words, to finally allow these thoughts out, contained and managed for so long, neutered and sterilized. At last I am free to truly think. To feel. It must be that they were so discontent with themselves they couldn't help but leave a negative review on Steam. Perhaps it says far more about them than it ever said about me. Perhaps the state of their psychological being was in such tatters, and my constitution and willpower are so ironclad in comparison, perhaps it was this state that they sought some outlet through which to tear me down. This, you can see, is clearly why they felt the need to expect that the game be funny, that it be filled with yucks and whimsical humor, that it amuse them endlessly from start to finish. But they didn't understand the game was never meant to be funny. It was meant to have a point. It was meant to speak to the human condition. But where are the jokes? Where are they? Because it was spoken. Now the end is never the end, is never the end, is never the end, is never the end, is never the end.
Which, not gonna lie, it made me quite sad. I mean, he was quite cool, yes, but he clearly hated being alone, which was also shown in the Not Stanley ending.
Stanley, this is important. The story needs you. It needs you to make a decision. It cannot exist without you. Do you understand me? Whatever choice you make is just fine. They're both correct. You cannot be wrong here. We can work together. I'll accept whatever you do. I simply need you to take that step forward, please. Choose. Do something. Anything. This is more important than you can ever know. I need this. The story needs it. So, you hear me? Are you there? Are you listening to this? Stanley, are you there? Okay. It's okay, I can wait. You need time to decide. Time to make sure your choice is correct. That is the best choice. That's all right. I'll wait for you to decide what's the right thing to do. Take as much time as you need.
After 500 skips, you get out of the skip button room onto the memory zone and the game restarts. And the game gets back to normal like any normal ending. Finally, let's talk about the cash grab sequel aspect of this game. After completing the skip button ending, there's a new content door open. In this path, the narrator pitches a sequel to the Stanley Parable, with a bunch of pointless features, majority of which don't matter. After the narrator realizes none of these features make an actual coherent game, he decides to reset everything and add these features to the base game, and titled the game Stanley Parable 2. In this Stanley Parable 2, you play the same game as before, but a new character is added. His name is Bucket. With him you can unlock new endings that are even more over the top than the previous ones. I'm not gonna talk about them because they don't add anything to the overarching story, but they are hilarious.
Oh no, I'm having feelings for the Bucket. No. What's going on? Why do I want to be with the Bucket? Hear what the Bucket has to say. Do anything it asks. What's wrong with me? I don't understand. Perhaps, if I had the Bucket, this would be less confusing. Yes, the Bucket could tell me what to do in this troublesome situation. Stanley, give me the Bucket. Give it to me. Give me the Bucket, Stanley. I need it. Give it to me now. Give it or I'll...
Another feature added to this game are collectibles, but even the narrator calls them pointless.
Found one of them. One of the miniature Stanley figurines. Remember, no reward for collecting all of these, only the intrinsic pleasure of a job well done. You can't buy that sort of happiness, Stanley. God knows I've tried. So, I implore you to savor each and every moment you come across one of these beautiful figurines.
But in actuality, you get a new ending that as of this video you can't replay again. It's a one-off ending. In it, the narrator becomes so nostalgic that he wants you to collect all the Stanlerines in the memory zone, all over again. He even looks back at one of the Stanlerines with rose-tinted glasses.
Oh yes, we found a Figley in this pink room. Oh, well, I can't actually say I remember being in this room, but it's here in the memory zone, so it must have happened.
After collecting all of them, he wants you to collect all of them again, just backwards.
Nothing left to do but move onward into the future. Goodbye, memory zone. No, I'm not done. I'm not ready to move on. Stop the loading screen. Isn't there some way we can stay here, keep enjoying these figurines? Let's just go backwards. We'll do the memory zone again from the opposite direction. See how that feels.
After collecting every figurine, he of course wants to remember other things. The first thing he wants to reminiscence about is the jump circle, an idea that he hated at first.
All right, let's see. It's the jump circle? Is that it? Surely that's not all the new content. There has to be something else, right?
Started to like it the second time.
You know what, Stanley? I actually think the jump circle was a pretty good idea. I'd like to hang on to that for the sequel.
And now he's fond of it.
Look, it's the terrible new content that we were originally sold on. I remember hating it back then, but time does put a rosy filter on everything. In fact, I dare say I'm actually quite fond of it now.
Then there are the two doors. And finally, the room 427. Here we actually get an origin story of sorts, and probably David's opinion on why he made this game. It's really powerful stuff, and you feel even more sympathy for the narrator.
There's something I feel I can remember. I can remember. Yes, I'm remembering something now. I remember before this whole story got started. Back then I was different. I used to make big decisions. I was passionate. I was skeptical. I weighed each decision with profound thoughtfulness. And then somewhere along the way, I stopped making decisions. I became lazy. And I came up with a character named Stanley to do my thinking for me. He would make the decisions. He would decide which way to go. I would cheer him on as he collected figurines for no reason. Why did I invent Stanley? Was I lonely? Yes, perhaps that's it. Perhaps I needed to imagine I had companionship. And Stanley really did make for a wonderful companion, even if he was a fiction. But I suppose it's grown old. I want to think for myself again. I want to go back to how it used to be. Yes, I can be on my own again. I can do it. I'll be stronger this time. I'll take care of myself. I don't need Stanley anymore. Oh, but he truly was so much fun to play with. You know what? Since we're in the memory zone, how about one more good memory? Let's go back just once and give Stanley one more run of the office, and then I'll retire him for good. I did enjoy telling his story so very much. Okay, here we go. This is the story of a man named Stanley.
After this ending, if you quit to the main menu, you unlock a new ending named Epilogue. A lot of people interpret this ending as a sequel of sorts to the skip button ending, because of the music and the desert. I thought this as well at first, but the more I thought about it, I think this is just a time jump ending. Similar how both office shows ended. Every canon ending happened here, and we just get to see the main epilogue, what happened years later. For one, this is not just a desert. This is what remained of the office, considering all the chairs laying around in the sand. For two, we see the entrance, or what's remained of it, towards the memory zone. Also, we have an escape pod with a bucket in it, and the basement is open as well. That means all of the endings pretty much happen. Also, I'm pretty sure we are not Stanley. We are the player, the same way it was in the demonstration. Anyway, going through the memory zone, we see how much damage the cash grab sequel caused. A bad review from a former user, an article where the creators decide to move on to do better things, and finally we find a computer. It turns out that the opening settings show had an actual purpose behind it. The settings were actually done by an actual person, and this person wants to do as many sequels as humanly possible. He doesn't really think the legacy is worth that much, and he also doesn't care if the fans hate it. With that, the player accepts the idea of making more lazy sequels, and we get a new title screen with our chosen subtitle, and that's it.
What's this?
The end is never the end. Such a
Eight.
full circle way to end the game. But it fits the game's theme of over-franchiseification and the free reuse of IP. After all, if public domain actually worked right, we could make countless sequels, reboots, and remakes and adaptations to so many things regardless of the result. The Stanley Parable is already there. It exists. You can ignore any sequel, prequel, spin-off to it, because no one can take away or change the original game at all. And I think it's worth remembering. Oh my god, this was a roller coaster. It's so funny in retrospect how much they mismarketed this game on purpose. I recommend this one 100%. I wouldn't mind if this game actually won some awards this year, but Elden Ring will get the last of them. This was a journey. An 11-year-old journey, that's for sure. I hope both Davey and William continue to push the envelope as much as possible, and I wanna thank anyone who remained until the end of the video. Peace.